In this video, we're going to finish our badass iOS style app with iOS page transitions. We're going to make our app jump to the root of the current section if we're on a child page. So I'm in the home section now, and if we jump down to the grandchild page, and if I tap the home tab, then we jump right back to the root page of that section. We're going to create a composable function to make it easy for us to go back, so that we don't need to specify the root in each of our back buttons. We're going to add this swipe to go back functionality, so the user can swipe to go back as well as clicking the buttons in the header. We're going to make sure our app works with dynamic content by creating this dynamic image gallery section, where when we tap on an image, we see a detail page with a larger version of that image and a title for that image. We're going to test the app on a mobile browser and fix any issues. And finally, we're going to build, test and fix a real iOS Cordova version of this app on a real iOS device. In this series, I'm documenting my journey creating a real-world Quasar app using Quasar 2 and Vue 3, and that's this app, Fudget 2. And this app will ultimately be deployed to the iOS, Android, Mac and Windows app stores. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss any of the videos in this series. And if you missed the last two videos where we started creating this iOS style app, you can find the link to the whole playlist in the description. If we're in the home section of our app and we jump down to the grandchild page and we tap on the home tab, what do we expect to happen? Well, I would expect to jump right back to the root of the home section, but this is not currently happening. Currently, nothing is happening. And that's because every time we change root, we're updating the to prop on this navigation tab in our router.js file by firing this update nav item function. So when we're on the root homepage, the to prop on this navigation item is set to /home. Then when we jump to the child page, the to prop is set to /home/child. And when we go to the grandchild page, it's set to /home/child/grandchild. So when we're on the grandchild page and we click this button, it's just taking us straight to the page that we're already on. So what could we do to fix this? Well, if we look at our router.js file, this else block will be fired whenever we navigate to the same section. And what we could do is look at the path that we're coming from in from.path and the path that we're going to in to.path. And if these two paths are the same, which they will be if we're on a child page and we click on the home tab, because we're on /home/child/grandchild. And when we click this, we're trying to go to /home/child/grandchild. And so if the from path and the to path are the same, then we can just redirect the user to the root of the current section. So what we can do is we can add another if block in this else statement here. So we can do if from.path is equal to to.path, then we can redirect the user to the root of this section. And the root path for the current section will be in this to root path variable. So now we can just do router.push to root path, and I'll save that. So now if we're on a grandchild page and we tap on the home tab, we jump right back to the home page, back to the root of this section. However, we do have a little issue here. If we're on the root page of a section, which we are now, and we tap on the home tab, then our app crashes. And it crashes because we've entered a never-ending loop, because we're on the root page of this section, and then we tap the home navigation tab, and we send the user to the home page, and then this router.after each hook is going to fire again and send the user to the home page, and this is just going to happen over and over and over again. So we only want to send the user to the root page of the current section if the from path is equal to the to path, but also only if they're not currently on the root page of the current section. So to do this, we can just add another condition to this if block here. And we can just make sure that the path they're going to is not equal to the root path of the current section. So we can just do to.path is not equal to the to root path. So I'll save that, and I'm going to have to close this tab because it's just completely frozen now. So I'll close that and open up a new tab. And let's check this is okay now. So if we jump down to a grandchild page, click on the home tab, then we jump back to the root page of this section. But if we now tap the navigation tab again, then the app doesn't crash because we're not firing this router.push command. Let's just make sure it works on our child page as well as the grandchild page. So I'm on the child page, I'll tap on home, and we're right back on the root page of this section. In a little bit, we're going to add the ability to swipe to go back, as you can see in the finished app here. But before we do that, let's create a composable function which makes it easy for us to go back. And this composable function will automatically figure out the route to the current direct parent page of the current page and send us there, so that we don't need to manually specify the routes on all of these back buttons. And we can also use this composable function in our swipe to go back functionality as well. So let's create our go back composable. So I'm going to create a new folder in the source folder called use. And in there, I'm going to create a file called useGoBack.js. And in this file, we want to export a default function. And we're going to call this useGoBack. And for now, I'm just going to log out useGoBack. And we'll save that. And now let's make all of our back buttons use this composable when we click on one of these back buttons, instead of manually specifying the two props on these buttons. So I'm going to jump to components, page, and page header button back. And first of all, we need to import our composable function. So we want to import useGoBack from source/use/useGoBack. And then we need to add our setup function and return this. So we'll just return useGoBack. And we can now use this in our template. So let's add a click handler to this back button. And we'll just trigger the useGoBack function. And I'll save that. And we also need to remove all of the to props from all of our back buttons. So I'm going to open up pages, and I'll open all of the pages which have back buttons. So that's child.vue, grandchild.vue, and then in the questions folder, we have answer.vue. So in child.vue, I'll remove this to prop from the back button, save that. Then in grandchild.vue, I'll remove the to prop here and save that. And I'll do the same on the answer page as well and save that. And I'll just close all of these pages. And now when we click on a back button, we should see useGoBack being logged out. So I'll just clear the console, click on a back button. And yeah, we can see useGoBack being logged out. And it still sent us back to the previous page there. So I'm just going to reload the app. And yeah, this useGoBack function seems to be firing. Okay, so let's work on this useGoBack composable. And we're going to need access to the router here, because when this function fires after clicking on a back button, we need to know what the current route is in order to determine the immediate parent route of the current route, so that we can send the user to that route. And we can make our router available using our router boot file. So I'm going to jump to source boot and router.js. And before our boot function here, I'm going to set up a variable where we can store our router instance. And I'll just call this router instance and set that to null. And then in this boot function, we have access to our router. So we can just assign that to this router instance variable. So we can just do router instance equals router. And this variable will now give us access to our router. So we're going to need to export it. So at the bottom here, we can do export, then curly braces, and then router instance. And we should now be able to use this variable anywhere in our app. So I'll save that and jump back to our useGoBack composable. And we need to import this router instance variable. So we can just do import router instance from boot/router. And to begin with, let's just log out this router instance variable and see what's in there. So I'll just log out router instance and save that and reload the app. and we'll click on a back button. And we can see this router instance variable being logged out. And we have this current route property, which will give us the current route at currentroute.value.path. So let's just log that out. So router instance.currentRoute.value.path, and save that. Reload the app, and we'll click on a back button, and we see the current route being logged out, which is correct, home/child/grandchild. So we want to send the user to the immediate parent route of this route. So how can we figure out the immediate parent route? Well, we just need to remove the last part of this route. So we just want to remove /grandchild in this case. So what we could do is split this string up into an array based on the / character, and then remove the last item in the array, and then join that array back into a string using the / character. So first of all, let's just split this into an array. So I'll set up a variable called path array, and we'll set this equal to router instance.currentRoute.value.path, and then we're going to split that based on the / character. Let's just log this out. So I'll log out path array, and I'll just get rid of these other console logs and save that, and reload the app and click on a back button. So now we just want to remove the last item in this array and then join the array back together again as a string using the / character. But before we do that, we want to make sure the user is on a child page or a grandchild page and not on a root page, because we don't want to send the user back if they're on a root page, because there's nowhere to go back to. And so if we're on a root page, such as the home page, then this array here will have 2 items in this array, this empty string and then the name of the root page of that section. So before we send the user back, we want to make sure this array has more than 2 items in it, to make sure they're definitely on a child page or a grandchild page, etc. So I'm just going to make sure this array has more than 2 items. So we can do if patharray.length is greater than 2. So now we want to remove the last item in this array. So we can just do patharray.pop to remove the last item. And I'll just log this out again to make sure that's working. I'll reload the page, click on the back button, and yeah, we can see it's removed the grandchild item from this array. So now we want to join it back together again using the / character. So I'll set up a new variable here called new path, and we'll set that equal to patharray.join, and we're going to join it with the / character. Let's just log this out, new path. I'm going to remove all of these other console logs, save that, reload the page, click on the back button, and yeah, this looks correct. New path /home/child, which is where we want to go to if we're on /home/child/grandchild. So now we just want to send the user to this path. So we can just do router instance.push, and we can just push them to this path. So we can just put new path in here, and I'll save that. And let's see if this is working. So we're on the grandchild page, click on the back button. We're on the child page, click on the back button here, and we're on the home page. And let's just make sure it's working in the questions section as well. So we're on the answer page, and we click on the back button, and we're back on the questions page. In a mobile app, when you're on a child page, you expect to be able to swipe to go back to the immediate parent page. And Quasar has some touch directives that we can use for this. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site, and I'll jump to view directives and touch swipe. So we can use this touch swipe directive to detect a swipe on the page. And I'll just scroll down a bit here. So this example here only detects swipes to the right. So if we swipe to the left, nothing happens. And if we swipe right, something happens. So I'll just click on view source, and I'm just going to copy this vtouch swipe directive here, and we'll add it to our page. So we'll go to source, components, and page.view, and we'll add that to this page div. So I'll split the attributes and paste in this touch directive. But we want to fire our use go back composable function. So we need to import that. So like we did before, we need to import use go back from source/use go back. And we need to return this as well in our setup function. So use go back. And we should now be able to fire that on this vtouch swipe directive. So we can just put use go back in here. And let's save that and see if it's working. I'll reload the page. We're on the grandchild page right now. So I'll swipe to the right. And for some reason, it's taken us all the way back to the home page. So it looks like this directive has fired twice. So let's try moving it to this page nudge div and see if that works. Paste that in there and save it. Reload the app and swipe to the right. And that seems to be working now. We're now on the child page. Swipe to the right again and we're back on the home page. And hopefully if we swipe to the right now on the root page of this section, then nothing will happen. And it doesn't, because remember in our use go back function, we're making sure the user isn't on a root page before sending the user back. And let's make sure it works in the questions section as well. I'll jump down to the answer page, swipe back, and it all seems to be working. Let's make sure we can work with dynamic content in this app by creating a beautiful image gallery section. So I'm going to duplicate the home page in source pages home.vue. So I'm going to copy that and I'll create a new folder in the pages folder called images. And we'll paste that file in there, rename it to images.vue. We'll change the title in the header to images, and I'll just replace everything inside the page body component with just the word images for now. And we'll change the name of this component to images as well. Save that. We need to set up a root for this page. So let's jump to our router, source, router, and routes.js. And let's set up a new root here. So after this questions root, we'll set up a new object. I'll just copy the path and component from the questions root, paste that in there. We'll change the path to /images and change the component to pages/images/images.vue. And now we need a navigation tab so we can get to this page. So let's jump to our store file, which has all of our navigation items. And I'll duplicate this questions object, change the root and the to /images, change the label to images, and I'm going to use an image icon from Line Awesome for the icon, and the class is LAS and then LA-image. So I'll save that, and we can see our new navigation item. So if we click on that, we get to the images page. So now we need some images, and I have a folder on my desktop called images, and in there I have 6 images, JPEGs, which are all unique. And I grabbed these from pixabay.com. So you could just go to pixabay.com, grab any 6 images you like from here, save them to a folder called images, and just name them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.jpg. And I'm going to drag this images folder into my public folder in my project. So I'll open up the Explorer, and I'm just going to drag this folder into this public folder. And we can see that folder here and the 6 different images. Okay, now let's set up an array for these images in our store. So I'm going to jump to our store file, source, my store, and index.js. And in a real app, you'd probably want to have separate stores. For example, one store for your navigation items and one store for each section of your app or each page of your app. But for simplicity, I'm just going to put everything in this one store. So after our nav items, I'll add a new array called images. and we'll set up an object for each image, and we'll give each image an ID property. I'll give the first one an ID of ID1, and we're going to give it a URL property, and everything inside this public folder is going to be available at the path /. So for the URL to the first image, we can just set this to /images and then /1.jpg, and we'll give each image a caption as well. We'll set these captions in a sec, but for now I'm just going to duplicate this object 5 times, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll update the IDs and the URLs. So ID2 and 2.jpg, ID3, 3.jpg, 4, 5, and we need one more object here. So I'll duplicate this last one, set the ID to ID6 and the URL to /images/6.jpg. And let's add some captions. So the first image is a tiger, so I'll set the first one to tiger. Second image is a man, so I'll just put man. And the third image is some mountains, so I'll set the caption to mountains. Fourth one is a road in the mountains, so road in mountains. And the fifth one is some nighttime hills, so I'll set this one to nighttime hills. And the sixth one is a cute dog, so I'll set the caption to cute dog. And I'll save that. And on our images page, we can now loop through this array and spit out all of the images. So I'll jump to images.vue, and we need access to our store. So we need to import store from source/my_store. And we need to return this in our setup function, store, and we should now have access to this images array at store.state.images. So let's display our images using the QImage component. If we go to the Quasar site, view components and image, then we can use this component here. To set the path to the image, we can just use this source property. So let's add a QImage component to the page, and we'll add a v4 directive to this so we can loop through all of our images. So we'll add v4 image in store.state.images. We need to add a key to each one, and we'll just set this to the ID, image.id. And we need to set the source for each one, and this is going to be at image.url. And the QImage component has this really handy ratio prop that we can set to determine the aspect ratio of the image. And on this page, I want all of the image to be perfect squares. So to do that, we can just set the ratio to 1. So I'll also add this prop as well, ratio, set that to 1. Let's save that. We can see all of our images on the page. And I want these to be a little bit smaller, maybe have 2 images to each row. So let's use some rows and columns to make each image half the width of the page. So I'm going to surround this QImage in a div with a class of row to make this a row. And let's make each image a column. And Quasar's grid system has a 12-point system. So if we had a class such as col-12, then that column will take up the entire width that's available. And if we want it to take up half of the width available, then we can just use the class col-6. So I'll save that, reload, and we can now see our images in a nice little grid. Let's set up the image detail page. So I'm going to duplicate images.vue as image.vue. We'll update the title in the header to just image. And in the page body, for now, I'll just put image detail page. And we'll change the name to image as well. And we'll leave the store because we are going to need that to grab the image that we want to display from the store. So I'll save that. And now let's set up a dynamic route for our image detail page. So I'll jump to router and routes.js, and we'll add a children array under this images route. And I'll just copy the path and component properties from here. And this needs to be in an object. So let's just fix that. And we'll set the path to /images/ and then we'll add a dynamic slug here called ID. So we can just add :ID. So if we go to, for example, /images/ID1, then the ID property, ID1, will be available to us via our router parameters. And we need to change the component to /image.vue. Let's save that. Let's add some links to each of these images on the images page so that we can actually get to the image detail page. So I'll jump back to images.vue, and I'll surround this QImage component in a router link component. I'll move the image up into this router link component, and we need to move our v4 directive and our key property up to this router link. And we also need to move this column class up to the router link as well. And to specify the link for this router link, we need to add a toProp. And I'll set this to a template string. And this wants to go to /images/ and then the ID of the current image. So we can just add $curly braces and then image.id. And I'll save that, reload the page. So this page is still looking okay. And if we click on the first image, we can see that we go to the image detail page. And in the address bar, we can see /images/ID1. And if we go back, click on the second image, we can now see /images/ID2. So this is working now, but we need a back button on the image detail page as well, so the user can get back to the images page. So in our page header component, let's add a template component and target the buttons -left slot. And I'll just copy a back button from one of our other child pages. So answer.vue, I'll copy this page header button back component, jump back to images.vue and paste that in here. And we'll set the label to images and save that. So let's just make sure that back button is appearing. And I've put that on the wrong page there. This should be on image.vue and not images.vue. So I'll cut this template, save that, and jump to image.vue and paste it in this page header. Save that, reload, click on an image, and yeah, we can see the back button. And we can also swipe to go back as well. So when this image detail page is activated, we want to grab the correct image from our store so that we can display the image and the caption as well. So let's add an activated hook to this page image.vue. So first of all, we need to import onActivated from Vue. And we can now add an onActivated hook to our setup function. So I'll add that here. And for now, I'll just log out activated to make sure this is working. So I'll jump to the images page, clear the console and jump down to the image detail page. And we can see activated being logged out. And let's just jump to a different image. And again, we can see activated being logged out. So when this activated hook is fired, we want to grab the correct image from our store. And in order to do that, we're going to need the ID of the current image, which in this case here is ID2. And because we set up this dynamic route where the slug following /images is going to be a dynamic parameter called ID, then we can get access to this ID from our root parameters. And in Vue 2, we could get access to our root parameters at this $root.params. But in Vue 3, we don't have access to this. So we need to do it a little bit differently. So if you just Google next Vue router and jump to the next Vue router site and jump to composition API, we now need to import this use root composable from Vue router. And we can then get access to our root parameters in our setup function. So in image.vue, we need to import use root from vue-router. And then in our onActivated hook, we can store this in a variable. So let's call that root, set that equal to use root, parentheses. And we can now get access to our root parameters at root.params. And because we've named our ID parameter ID, then we can get access to this parameter at root.params.id. So let's just log this out to make sure it's working. So get the image with ID, and then we'll just spit out root.params.id. Just get rid of this line here and this console log here. And let's make sure that's working. So I'll reload the app, click on the first image, and we can see in the console, get the image with the ID, ID1. Let's jump to the second image, and we see get the image with ID, ID2. So now let's set up a simple getter in our store, which will get the image that we want based on this ID. So I'm going to jump to our store file, and I'm going to add a new object here, a constant called getters, where we can store all of our getters. And we'll set this equal to an object. And we also need to add this object to our store here. So I'll add that there. Let's set up a getter for grabbing an image from this images array based on an ID. So we'll call this getter getImage. And this is going to expect an image ID. And for now, we'll just log out the image ID and save that. And now back on image.vue, let's set up a ref for storing our image data. So we'll do let image equals ref, and we need to return this. So we'll add that here, image, and we also need to import the ref method from Vue. So I'll add that to this import here, ref. And now let's trigger the getter that we just created, getImage, in this activated hook. So this getter is going to be available at store.getters.getImage. So we can just do image.value equals store.getters.getImage. And we want to pass in the ID, which we're grabbing from the root parameters. So root.params.id. I'll get rid of this console.log, save that, reload the app, click on an image, and we can see the correct image ID being logged out by our getter. So now we want to actually get the image data from our images array based on this ID, and we can use a filter to do this. So in our getImage getter, we can just do return, and we want to grab our images array, which is at state.images, and then we want to filter that. So we want to do .filter, and we want to pass in a placeholder for each object in the array as it's looping through it. And we'll just call that image. Then we want to add our callback. And what do we want to check? We want to check if the ID property is equal to the ID that we're passing in here. So we can just check if image.id is equal to image ID. So this is going to return an array with just a single item in it, the item which has the same ID that we're passing in. So we also need to grab the first and only item in that array. So we need to add square brackets and 0 at the end of this. Let's save that and jump back to image.vue. So hopefully that image data should be being assigned to this image ref here. So for now, let's just add a pre-tag to our body here and spit out this image ref to make sure that's working. Save that. And yeah, we're looking at the first image here and we can see the correct image data for the first image. And if we jump back and click on the second image, we can now see the data for the second image, the ID, the URL, and the caption. So now let's display the image on the page. So I'll replace this pre-tag with another QImage component. We want to set the source to image.url. And we only want to display this component if we actually have some image data in this image ref. So let's also add a vif directive and only display this component if we have something in this image ref. So I'll save that. And we can now see the image being displayed. However, when we go back out of an image and click on a new image, we can briefly see the previous image being displayed. And that's because all of the pages in this app are keeping alive. So let's also add a deactivated hook to this page, which will set this image ref back to null when we leave the page, so that we don't see the previous image when we click on a new image. So I'm also going to import on deactivated from Vue. And I'll just duplicate this onActivated hook and change it to on deactivated. And we'll just set image.value back to null and save that. Reload the app. And we can now no longer see the previous image that was loaded before. So let's also display the image caption and some text as well. So after our QImage component here, I'm going to add a div with some padding. So I'll use one of Quasar's padding classes, q-p-all for padding all, -lg for a large amount of padding. And for the caption, I'll add a div with a class of text-h5. So we get h5 style heading. And we'll add some margin bottom to that. So q-mb-md. And we'll just spit out image.caption. And then after that, we'll just spit out a paragraph with some lorem ipsum. And we also don't want any of this to display if there's nothing in this image ref. So let's add a div to surround both the image and the text as well. And then we'll move that vif directive from the QImage to this div. And save that. Reload. And we can now see the image and the caption as well. And it seems to be working if we switch images. And if you've enjoyed this video so far, do me a favor and smash the like button and leave a comment telling me if you would have done any of this app differently. Before we move on and start testing this app, I just want to fix a couple of issues with this page. So the first issue is that when we go back, we see the image and the text suddenly disappear, which isn't very smooth. So what we could do is remove the default transition on this image that Quasar is adding, and then add our own transition for all of this content so that we can see it all fade in nicely when we hit the page and fade out nicely when we leave the page. So the first thing we need to do is remove this transition that Quasar is adding to the image. And we can also remove the spinner that you briefly see as well. So if we jump to the Quasar site, view components and image and the API, then we can use this no spinner prop to remove the spinner and this no transition prop to remove the animation. So I'll add those props to our image. So no dash transition and no spinner. Save that. Reload the app. And we now no longer see that transition when the page is loaded. And now let's add our own transition. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and I'll just search for animation and jump to the animations section. And we can just wrap this div, which has both our image and our text, in one of these transition components. So I'm just going to copy the opening tag of this transition and paste it in here. Just to indent this div and add the closing transition tag, and I'll save that. And we might need to add the fade in and fade out animations to our config file. So I'm going to jump to quasar.conf.js in the root of our project, search for animations. Yeah, we do need to add those animations. So fade in and fade out. I'll save that. Let's see how that's looking. I'll reload the app. We can see it fading out when we leave the page. We don't really see it animate when we enter the page. So let's slow these animations down a little bit. And we can do that by adding a class of slow or slower. Let's try slower. Reload the page. Click on an image. And yeah, we can now see it all fading in nicely and fading out nicely when we leave the page. And we still have one little issue on this page. When we swipe to go back, if we do it down here below the image, then it works okay. But if we try to swipe to go back on the actual image, then it doesn't work. So what we could do is disable pointer events on this image component. And Quasar has a class that we can use to do that. So on this queue image component, we can add a class of no-pointer events and save that. And this image should now ignore any pointer interactions. We could see the swipe to go back is now working again. Before we create a Cordova iOS app out of this app, let's test it on a mobile browser first. And what you can see on the screen here is my iOS device, an iPhone XS. And to launch this app in the browser, we can just open up the terminal and we can see the URL that we need here. And you do need your iOS device to be connected to the same network. But I'm just going to jump to this address, so 192.168.22:8080. And we can see our app here. And it's looking pretty good. We can see all of our tab items. We can scroll all the way to the bottom. We can jump to our different sections. And we can jump to all of our child pages. And we can tap the back button in the header to go back, no problem. However, we do have an issue with our swipe to go back, because iOS has its own swipe to go back functionality built into the browser. So if we go down to a child page and swipe to go back, then we see all kinds of crazy stuff happening because of iOS Safari's default swipe to go back functionality. So what we need to do is, if the user is on iOS and they're in a browser, then we need to disable the go back functionality that we've implemented and also disable the page transitions as well. So let's set up a state property for knowing if the user is on an iOS browser and they're swiping back. So I'm going to jump to source and my store and index.js, and I'll add a new property to the state here, and I'll call this iOS browser swiping back, and we'll set that to false by default and save that. And now let's jump to our page component, so source, components, page, and page.view. And let's adjust our vtouch swipe directive here so that it triggers a function in our setup function instead of firing the use go back function straight away. So we'll get this to trigger a function called handle swipe right. We'll set this up in our setup function. I'll just add a block comment called handle swipe right. And we'll set up this function. So const handle swipe right equals a function. And we'll use Quasar's platform detection to determine if the user is on iOS and they're using a browser. And you can learn all about Quasar's platform detection on the Quasar site if you just search for platform detection. But when we're using the composition API, we need to import the use Quasar composable in order to access the platform detection. So we need to import use Quasar from Quasar. And then in our setup function, I'll add another block comment at the top here, which just says Quasar. And then we can just set up a variable called $Q, set that equal to use Quasar. And we can now get access to Quasar's platform detection at $Q.platform. So in this handle swipe right function, we can just do if $Q.platform.is.iOS. So if the user is on iOS, but we also want to make sure the user is not in a Cordova or capacitor app because we won't have these swipe issues on those platforms. So we also want to add a couple more conditions. So we want to add not $Q.platform.is.Cordova. So the user is not on Cordova. And we also want to make sure they're not on capacitor in case you're creating a capacitor app. So not $Q.platform.is.capacitor. So if this condition is true, then we know that they're on iOS and they're in a browser and not in a Cordova or capacitor app. And if that's the case, when they've just swiped right, then we don't want to trigger our use go back function because we want to let the browser take care of going back. And we want to disable our page transitions. And we're going to do that using the state property, which we just set up, this iOS browser swiping back property. So if they are on iOS in the browser, then we're going to set this property to true. So we can just do store.state.iOS browser swiping back, set that equal to true. Otherwise, if they're not on iOS in the browser, then we just want to trigger our use go back function. So we can just add else use go back. And I'll save that. And we also need to add this function to our return statement. So I'll add that here, handle swipe right, save that. And we also want to set this iOS browser swiping back property back to false once the user has made it back to the previous page that they swiped back to. And so this on the activated hook will be fired on the previous page after we finished leaving it and we've got back to the previous page. So what we can do in this on the activated hook is, again, if they're on iOS and in the browser, then we can set store.state.iOS browser swiping back to false. So false. And we're making the same check twice here. So let's put this in a computed property. So I'll add a computed property down here. And I'll add a block comment which says detect iOS device using browser, brackets, not Cordova or capacitor. And we'll set up a computed property called is iOS browser. Set that equal to a computed property. And we need to import computed from vue. So we'll add that here. Computed. Back to this computed property. We also need to add it to our return statement here, is iOS browser. And I'm just going to copy this opening if statement here and paste that here. So if those conditions are true, we want to return true on this computed property. Otherwise, we want to return false. And now we can just replace this check here with is iOS browser, and the same here as well. So is iOS browser. I'll save that. So now we want to only enable our page transitions here when this iOS browser swiping back property is false. So we can just add another condition to this CSS prop value here. And we can just add not store.state.iOS browser swiping back. So let's save this and see how it's looking now. I'm just going to reload the app, jump to a grandchild page and swipe back. and it's looking a lot better. We can't see our page transitions, but we can still see the nudge left class being added and removed. So let's disable our page nudger styles when store.state.iOS browser swiping back is true. And one way we could do this is by adding a class to the queue layout component, which surrounds our whole app. So I'm going to jump to source, layouts, main layout.vue, and I'll split the attributes on this queue layout component using the split HTML attributes extension. We'll bind to the class attribute, and we'll add a class of iOS browser dash swiping dash back, but only when this state property iOS browser swiping back is true. So we can just do store.state.iOS browser swiping back, and I'll save that. And we already have access to our store, so that should work okay. And now let's jump to our page nudger styles. So I'll go to source, CSS, and app.scss. And here's our page nudger styles. So I'm actually just going to cut that and add a new comment here, page nudger, paste that in here. And we only want to add these styles if the queue layout component doesn't have this class on it. So we can use a not selector to do this. So what we can do is surround all of these styles. And in fact, I'm going to have to change this to .page because it's no longer inside this page selector here. And so what we can do is .queueLayout, not, then parentheses, and then we can just add the class that we're conditionally adding. So iOS browser dash swiping dash back, add our curly braces, and then we can just move these page nudger styles up into this queue layout selector. So now these page nudger styles will only be added when we're not on iOS in the browser and we're not currently swiping back. So I'll save that and let's take a look at the app. I'll just reload the page, jump to a grandchild page and swipe back. And we can now no longer see those nudge left styles being added. So this way we can keep all of our nice transitions when we go forward in the app down to child pages, while keeping it looking nice when the user natively swipes back to the previous page. And by the way, I've checked this on an Android device in the Android browser, and the swipe to go back functionality seems to work out of the box. So the native swipe to go back functionality that's built into the Android browser seems to be ignored by the swipe to go back functionality that we've implemented. So it seems that we don't need to do anything special to get this working on Android in the browser. Let's get this app running as a Cordova iOS app, an app that can actually be deployed to the iOS App Store. And if you're on Android, you might want to launch this on an Android device, but I'm just going to cover iOS in this tutorial. So you need to make sure your device is connected to your computer. And then I'm just going to jump to the terminal and run Quasar dev-m for mode Cordova -T iOS. And let's launch that. And I'm just going to leave the default Cordova app ID. And I'm just going to use the first IP. And we see an error here, code signing error, signing for app name requires a development team. And we always see this error when we create a new Cordova iOS project. And we just need to open up the Xcode project in Xcode. So I'm just going to right click on this source Cordova folder and reveal that in Finder. And then I'll jump to Platforms, iOS, open up this Xcode project. Then we just need to click on the app name up here, go to Signing and Capabilities, and we need to choose a team from this drop down and choose a team for this drop down. And if you don't have a team here, you'll probably need to set that up on your Apple developer account. And then we also need to go to Build Settings and scroll down to this signing section. And we want to set all of these drop downs here to Apple development. And we should be good to go now to launch this on our device. But before we do that, I'm just going to add the WK web view to this project, because the web view that comes with Cordova by default is deprecated and has loads of issues. So if we go to the Quasar site and Quasar CLI, developing Cordova apps and preparation, and then switching to iOS WK web view, then it tells us how to install this web view. So first we need to get into the source Cordova folder. So I'll do cd source Cordova. Then we need to install this web view plugin with this command. So I'll copy that and launch that. And that's installed. And we also need to add this preference to our config.xml file in the iOS section. So I'm going to copy that preference and jump to source Cordova and config.xml. Scroll down to the iOS section. Just paste in this preference, save that, and we should be able to launch the app on the device now. So I'm going to jump back up to the root folder and run the command we ran before, quasar dev-m Cordova-T iOS. Choose the first IP, and we can see our icon added to the home screen. And for some reason it often gets stuck here, but we can just tap on the icon to launch the app. And it looks like we have some issues with our header and our footer as well, but it looks like we can get to all of our pages and we can go back. However, the swipe to go back is not working. So let's fix these issues in the next chapter. Okay, so we have a couple of issues with our layout here. And we're seeing these issues because I'm on an iOS device which has the notches at the top and the bottom, such as the iPhone 10, 11, 12. And we can see that Quasar has already added a little bit of extra height to our header to accommodate the top notch. But the first issue is that it's not added some bottom padding to the footer. So we need to add some styles to add that padding in to the footer. And the second issue is that we can see our content is being obscured by our header. And that's because if we go to source, CSS and app.scss, these spaces that we have in our page body are currently set to a fixed height. So the header spacer is set to a fixed height of 51 pixels. But our actual header is now taller than 51 pixels because Quasar has added this extra padding to the top. So we need to also add the same amount of extra height to our spacers, our header spacer and our footer spacer. So let's fix the footer first, and the Quasar site tells us how to do this. So if we go to developing Cordova apps and troubleshooting and tips, and we jump down to status bar and notch safe areas, then we can use these constants here to add this extra bit of padding, or we can add it as margin if we want to. So I'm going to jump to app.scss, and after all of our page styles, I'll add another comment here which says iOS notch safe margin and padding. And let's target our footer, the Q footer, and we'll copy these styles from this example here and paste that in here. Now we only want to add these styles if the user is on iOS within a Cordova app. And Quasar adds some classes to the body, which we can use to make sure we only add these styles when that is the case. So if we jump to Safari and develop and my device name and then this IP address, and in the Elements tab we can see on the body Quasar has added a class of platform-iOS and a class of Cordova as well. So we can use these classes to make sure we only use these styles when the user is on iOS and in a Cordova app. So we can just add .platform-iOS.Cordova, curly braces, and then we can just move this QFooter selector into there. Let's save that. And we can see our footer now has the extra space at the bottom. So now we need to fix our spacers. So let's do that. So after this QFooter selector, we'll select the page body spacer class. And then within that, we'll select the page body spacer dash header class. And then we'll do the same for our footer spacer. And for the header, we'll keep the height as it is, 51 pixels, but then we'll add some top margin to add the extra bit of space that we need, because padding won't work because it will actually add the extra height within the element. And so the header spacer would stay the same height. So we'll use margin instead, but I'll copy these header styles from this example on the Quasar page. And I'll just get rid of these comments. We'll change padding top to margin top. And we'll do the same thing for our footer spacer. So I'll copy these styles from the Q footer, paste them in here, but we'll change this to margin bottom instead of padding bottom, and save that. And we can now see the top of the page. Okay. And we can scroll all the way to the bottom as well and see what's at the bottom of the page. Now let's figure out why the swipe to go back functionality is not working. So I'm going to jump to components, page, and page.view. And I'll scroll down to our handle swipe right function. And it looks like this is iOS browser. Computer property is returning true, even though we are actually on the Cordova platform. So in this if block here, I'm just going to log out is iOS browser and see if we can see that being logged out. So I'll jump to Safari and develop my device and this IP address, and jump to the console, and I'll just click on the reload button here, and then I'll swipe right. And yeah, we can see is iOS browser being logged out. So for some reason this is returning true, this computer property, which it shouldn't be. So let's see what's in q.platform.is. So instead of logging this string out, we'll log out q.platform.is, save that, and I'll clear the console and swipe right. And we can see the platform object being logged out. So Cordova is true and iOS is true. So this computed property should be returning false, but for some reason it isn't. So let's try just logging out this computer property and see what's happening. So we'll log out is iOS browser, save that, clear the console, and I'll swipe right. And I think I see the problem here. When we make reference to our computer property here, the actual value of that computer property is in this value property here. So it looks like when we use our computer properties within our setup function, then we need to add .value to the end, just like we do with refs. So I'm going to remove this console log, and in this if statement, I'll change this to is iOS browser .value, and then I'll do the same here. So is iOS browser .value, and just make sure we're not using that anywhere else. And no, we're not. So I'll save that, and let's see if it's working. I'll swipe right, and it's now working. And let's just make sure everything else is working. So we can go to our child page and our grandchild page, and we can go all the way back. And let's make sure the pages are keeping alive. So I've changed the option in this option group. And if we go away and come back, the state of this page has been maintained. And we can scroll all the way to the bottom on all of our pages. And let's just make sure we can go to the deepest section of the deepest page in each section. So yeah, I'm on the deepest page in each section, and we can still jump to the correct page when we jump from section to section. So it's remembering our position in the tree of each section. And let's make sure we can jump back to the root of the section when we're on a child page and we tap on the tab. So we're on the image detail page, I'll tap the images tab. And yeah, we're back to the root of that section. And in the question section, I'm on the answer page, and I'll tap the questions tab. And yeah, we go back to the questions root page. And in the home section, I'll do the same. We're on the grandchild page, I'll tap the home tab, and we go back to the root of that section. And you can grab the source code for this project at dannys.link/iOS transitions code. And you can find the link to that in the description. Let me know in the comments if you would have done anything differently with this app. And in the next video, I'll probably get back to what I've been up to with Fudget 2. And you can find the link to the whole playlist in the description. Please hover over my face and click subscribe if you don't want to miss any of the videos in this series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.